So, welcome to Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. My name is Talib Jasir, founder and CEO of Afros and Audio Podcast Festival and the Vanguard Podcast Network. I'm excited to spotlight 29 outstanding indie podcast creators and professionals who answered the call to be a part of this series. My guest today is Gathoni Ngumba. Welcome and thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm so excited to speak with you. The last time we got an opportunity, and actually the first time we met, was
Mhm.
during an AfriPods initiative that you all were doing several recordings, and I got to
Right.
be a part of that. So I'm very grateful for that. Kevin is a longtime a friend of mine, and I'm just really excited to be able to connect on a more intimate and detailed level to get to know about you. So we're going to get started. As an influential figure in the African podcasting community, how did you initially become involved in this industry?
So I always say I stumbled into podcasting in Africa. So what happened is a friend of mine was met one of the founders of AfriPods, and he was looking for someone who did social media. And at that time, I was running my own company, and I was running my own social media. And my background is in journalism, so I had a bit of information and know-how on what social media is doing, how it's happening, what to do, what to not to do, and that kind of thing. So I actually came on board as a social media manager on like into AfriPods. And being who I am, I just started learning about the space. I got into the space and I found so many people who I knew from different spaces were in here. So the founders of Africa Podfest, for example, Melissa and Josephine. Josephine is an old family friend. Melissa is an old friend from like church. We grew up together. Sema Box, there was like Dan is the CEO. I've known Dan for such a long time. It's just people from very different walks of life in my past who just happened to be in the same space. And so it was very interesting for me. And since Africans are orators, the idea that we could tell stories interested me. So I was on board from the beginning. And just in being in the space, I've grown out of like now being in social media, more into community and creating spaces more for the podcasters, trying to figure out how do we get people together, because a lot of the feedback I get is it's very isolating. I don't know what's happening. The information on podcasting is very, the word a lot of podcasters use is whitewashed, where there's no information that relates to us as Africans on the continent. So it's just trying to figure out how to get people to learn about that and learn from each other and limit the gatekeeping so that we can grow the industry, because I think it can do really well in Africa. Radio is still our biggest medium. So, and we're orators. I mean, like we tell stories all the time. So it feels like home. It feels like the medium that's home. And so that's how I entered it. It was purely coincidence. I just grew in it.
That's awesome. I love that story. And I know that there has been an evolution since AfriPods entered the space, right? And so that in and of itself means that the impact is great. The impact of being able to build community in a large continent. This is not a small place to
It's
be able
huge.
to, yes, bring people together. This is not a small place where it's easy to just make things happen. You have language differences, you have cultural differences, you have infrastructure differences. So, how has it evolved? And what are some of the challenges that you have faced since being on board?
How it's evolved is first the growth. I feel like it's become more accessible. I feel like in part with growing, what community does is it allows more people to learn about it, and as more people learn about it, more people get on board. So there's been in like nuclear communities created across the continent. So there's like Z Pod Hub in Zambia, there's Niger Pod Hub in Nigeria, there's APVA. You have a lot of networks that are coming up. There's Solid Gold, there's GCR, there's Summerbox. There's a lot of spaces that are coming up now, and podcasters who are doing different things that in what they're doing in their small spaces, they're teaching more people about podcasting and growing the space in that sense. So it started small. I remember like Africa Podfest at the beginning did data, and they did it like in Kenya. It was a small group of people. And then they ended up like collaborating with Baraza, and then they did data now in Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. It's just that sort of as we go, you get more access, and then as you get more access, it grows. And it's things like now we have awards that are ours. This will be the third year of APVA awards. Someone in Nigeria, her name is Bidemi. Bidemi was just like, we need something to celebrate ourselves because, I mean, we don't have anything. And so she created the awards, and now it's going on the third year, and it's podcasters learning about it. And now a lot more nominations are going in. So she had released like her numbers from like the first year to the second year. It's just even seeing the growth in the number of people who submitted their podcasts, how many people voted. It's small things like those that let you know that the industry is growing. But when it comes to challenges, I feel like it's a lot of what you've mentioned. And just put it into perspective, in Kenya, we have more than 40 languages in my country, just my country. We have 54, 56 countries in Africa. So if you put it at that level in every country, even what's happening in Kenya versus what's happening in Uganda, it's not the same. It's, you can have points of similarities, but the culture is different, the languages are different, access is different. We have a lot more internet access like in the towns and everything, but what happens to the rural areas, because those are people who we need to represent, and Africa's population is mostly rural. So how do we make sure that even when we're telling the African story, we're not just representing the towns and the fancy little cities? How do we tell the story of the grandmother in her house in the rural area, and how do we get those people to come on board? How do we get people who speak in their languages and feel like it's accessible to them? Because a lot of times people feel like podcasting is like posh and middle class, and it's trying to break that down and make it, if you and your friends are sitting down and talking in slang and it's only you who'll understand it, there's a group of people in their 20s or whatever it is who'll understand and would feel what it is you're saying and be able to relate to it. And that's what I think a lot of the challenge is in trying to, one, make sure people understand it's for them. It's not a thing that's for, because it came in from the West, it feels like it's a very, if you speak English and you're proper and you do, it feels like that's who it is who should have access to it. So how do we make it accessible? And then how do people learn about it? Because again, if podcasting is new in America, it's really new in Africa. So how do I then explain to someone, you can use your phone. Start with your phone. Don't do the thing of you have to have what's the perfect mic. Just pick your phone with the headphones, grow from there. Tell your story. It's more important to tell your story than anything else. So I feel like trying to figure out education, trying to figure out accessibility, and trying to make it relatable would be what I would consider the greatest challenge is. Yeah.
Understandable. And the hope and the goal is that it becomes less challenging as time goes on, as more technology becomes available, accessibility becomes available. And I love what you said about the fact that it gets to be accessible everywhere and for
Mm-hmm.
everyone, because it is. And it's important that our stories are moving beyond the people who already know, right? Because that's how people change, right? That's how narratives change. That's how exposure to different folks in this world. And I'm of a belief that everyone has a story and gets to tell their story. And we are laying it down right now. This is our living record as human beings on this planet, wherever we
Mm-hmm.
are. So it's super important. And I really love what you all are doing. So tell us more about AfriPods and its mission to support African creatives.
So AfriPods is a podcast hosting and distribution platform. It is focused on the African creator. We also have an app if you want to listen to like the podcast. But the idea behind AfriPods was to create a space for the African, but in this sense, I feel like a lot of times Africans don't get the position. Like if it's, think about a listening platform, any listening platform, based on what your rankings will be, Africans will not get priority, right? We might get priority when it's like Africa month, and in May we'll get like a certain slot, and it's like great. But if you're trying to discover podcasts, and we know in the industry discoverability is an issue, how do we get podcasts that are from Africa discovered? That's what AfriPods is trying to do. It's basically a platform that if you want Africa, you have it. It's what we have on the platform. It's what we specialize in. The other thing is, in creating, we know it's expensive. So what we've done at AfriPods is we've managed to create a free hosting solution. So it's let the podcasters have access to what it is they would have in any other state of the art platform, but it's completely free, because we understand sometimes the person in the rural area doesn't have the money to pay for, you might have until a certain limit, you have it free, but what happens to their stories after that? They don't have access to that money. A lot of times the platforms will charge us in dollars. If you consider how much money that is in in our currency, a lot of people don't have access to that. So in trying to make it accessible, AfriPods has made the platform free. Something else is, because we understand data is an issue, the app is smaller on the platform, on the phones, because we know it's a thing of, you have to decide what is it. We're competing with Facebook and things like that, and we don't want to have an issue on storage and stuff like that. So how do we make sure the stories are told and are heard? The stories that are being told are heard. So it's getting like an app that's smaller in size but works exactly how it would everywhere else. Figuring out discoverability as an issue. So we have categorized in like languages as well. We have over 50 languages, local languages as well on the platform. In what I was saying before, where we need people to understand, tell your story in your language from where you're at. I think the person who said it best, I was having a conversation with Joseph from Sincerely Accra, and he said, a lot of times when we're listening to content from the West, we figure out their slang, we figure out everything, we'll be like, when someone's like, it's cap, we all know what cap is. No one had to teach us. But there's not that reciprocity when it comes to what it is we're doing. It's, why haven't you translated it? How can we do it? But we want people to understand that, speak in that language that you speak in. If it's Swahili as a Kenyan, if it's Kikuyu, because that's my mother tongue, speak in that, because there's people who understand that language who need their stories told, and it's not always trying to get to the global audience that matters. And so I think AfriPods is a place where we are creating a space for ourselves to exist, and then also it allows us to do it on our terms, so that you come to us and hear us, because here we have priority. So like I was saying, categorization, we have languages, we have country. So if you want to like listen podcasts from Kenya, you can actually check Kenya specific and just see what's there. We also have like the normal categories as well. And so it's just trying to figure out what are the issues that our podcasters have on the continent, and how can we work to fix them. We've done things where sometimes we've built technology based on things that podcasters asked for. There's a podcaster who wanted to know when the drop-off rate happens. So we talked to the tech team. We figured out a way to have it. It's podcasters who are saying, I record on my phone and I don't have an editor. So now there's an editor available on the platform, again, completely free. So it's just, how do we fix, like we were saying earlier, it's small fixes based on what it is that people need, so that we can grow the industry from like the people who are around us. Because I feel like a lot of times, I don't sound like an angry African, but a lot of times we're not given the platforms. It doesn't matter. We won't get the money on the platforms. We won't do all of that. So there needs to be someone who listens to what we want and then builds it for us. And I think that's the space AfriPods is filling.
I love that so much. The innovation, the technology, the access is really what a time to be alive. That there is now this opportunity, whereas maybe a decade ago, that might have been a huge desire and want, but the access to the technology wasn't available.
Right.
Now it is. And so this opportunity to build so much inside your own infrastructure, inside your own app, is just amazing in a lot of ways. And so I'm so excited about that opportunity. And I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and still, I mean, we have to recognize it as still, I would look at data that would talk about podcasts in different countries. And it's like, well, why is there not one African country on this list? And it's not even a consideration. It's not even a thought that it matters to anyone outside of Africa, and or that the data is worth acknowledging, right? And so this self-ownership and the self-autonomy is so important that, at least for me, even in over here in my space, it's like, okay, you won't, we will. It's as
Exactly,
simple as that. Yeah,
exactly that. It's creating your own spaces. And I think that's been the number one thing we've seen happening in the podcasting industry here. It's you won't do data for us, fine, we'll do our own data. You won't create an awards, you won't allow us into the awards, we'll create our own award. You won't allow this to happen, it's fine, we'll do it ourselves. And I think that's it's really amazing.
absolutely. And there's this, I guess, this already. People know who we are without knowing a thing about who we are. So I
Mm.
remember the Nollywood movie Lionheart, which I really loved, came up for an awards or something like that a couple of years ago, and they
Yeah.
were disqualified because this is an English speaking. It's like, well, we speak English here. What are you talking about, right?
Exactly. You need to fit in. And it's just like, but that's not who we are. I mean, like I'm sitting in a building now with internet and light. I'm in Africa, guys. This is what we are. You have to allow this version of us to show up. It's just who we are.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I love all of that. I'm gonna let it stand. Let's move on to the next question. You've been in the podcast industry for over 4 years. How have you seen the landscape of African podcasting evolve during this time?
Yeah, it's actually, I think I'm starting my 6th year, which blows my mind. But in the 6 years, I think it's just that there are more spaces I can walk in and say I do podcasting, and everyone's just not like, a what? A who? What? People understand what podcasting is. And it's growing to the point that I have a friend who's a podcaster. His name is Ben Psycho. And he was talking about how his mother watches a TV station in his mother tongue, and there's a podcast on that. So his mother is listening to a podcast, right? It's the fact that even people in the languages that, I mean, how, at what point in time would we reach them? Are understanding that podcasting is a thing and are taking advantage of it. It's seeing it grow into radio stations and things like that, where even in AfriPods, we have like the broadcast podcast, which allows us to take like the stream from the radio station and then create it into a podcast. And it's seeing something like that even be taken up, where traditional media is trying to figure out how do we digitize and having a conversation where we're having to build the technology that allows them to do that. Because like I mentioned, radio is huge here, but how do we take advantage of that as well, where the content can be listened to after? And it's seeing big media houses like Nation Media, Standard Media Group in Kenya, Capital FM just putting in their podcast. These are traditional media houses coming into the space to be like, okay, how do we figure out digitizing? It sounds very, very small and obvious, but it's those things that make me see the growth in what it is that's happening. It's Africa Media Festival, the second one is happening this year. There's a whole thing planned for podcasting this year. Last year it was one panel. This year it's like a whole lineup. And it's just tiny things like that every year. Something new happens. It's seeing podcasters like in Zambia, there's a lady called Chulu who did a multi city tour for podcasting. I mean, who does that? Which podcast is like, I'm going to be next week, I'm in this city, buy your tickets. It's very exciting to see podcasters being able to do that just outside of the lives that we know. And I went on a podcast tour. That's not something at the beginning when we were trying to figure out. I remember going for the first unconference that Africa Podfest had, and it's how many podcasters do we have in Kenya? Where do we access them? I don't know where to get them. And now podcasters are coming and being like, when's the next event? I'm ready to come. Or if you put out an event, because we have a lot of community events, you'll put it out, and in a day you have over 130 podcasters who signed up. Where did they come from? And it's all of them just craving the space to be together, to learn, to do all of these things. That's where I see growth. It's in small numbers, it's in people understanding what the market is, it's in advertisers now being interested in podcasts. There's people who are reaching out being like, my clients want to be on podcasts. What? I mean, a year ago, a year and a half ago, if you're trying to sell your podcast to a brand, they'd be like, what's that? How do I access? I don't know what you're talking about. And it's seeing that it's becoming viable even when it comes to money that lets me know it's growing. So it's just tiny things like that have shown me the growth in the space.
That's awesome. And I'll be honest with you, just seeing the amount of social media, the amount of conversation that is happening around at the African podcast, y'all are busy. Y'all are doing your thing. And it's one of those things that you want people to understand that in order for podcasting to grow, it is our responsibility to be loud and proud about it at all times so we can increase the voices, we can increase the listeners. That's not on anybody else. That's on us who believes in this medium and wants to see it grow. And you mentioned radio being large there. Obviously, even here, the default sources of entertainment, news, and all of that is going to come from TV, radio,
Yeah.
YouTube. We still have to push podcasting. We still have to educate on podcasting. Y'all doing that. Y'all not playing. That's basically what I'm
We're
saying.
trying to, we're
Exactly.
trying to play catch up. So we have to, we're on a different pace here. We're
Hmm.
playing catch up. So we have to do it really fast. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I see it. That's amazing work that you all are doing. As a community manager at AfriPods, what strategies do you employ to create effective networking and learning spaces for African podcasters?
Okay, so one of the things we did or keep doing is called AfriPods Meets. So it's we'll set up a virtual meetup for podcasters in different countries, and you just put a call out like on social media. Hi Zambia, we're coming to you. Sign up. Here's the link and whatever, and we'll go on Zoom and just have a conversation, learn about what's happening in their space, learn about what the industry is like there, what are the challenges they have, what would they want to see in a tech company, that kind of thing, so that we can get information as well to improve what it is we're doing at AfriPods for the podcaster. But then what we learned in these meetings is a lot of times podcasters will come in and be like, oh, I didn't know there was this many podcasters in my country. And so in that sense, they end up, oh, send us an email with all of our emails in it. We want to have a meetup. We want to do, that kind of thing. And in us trying to help improve what it is that we're offering the podcasters, we were able to also create spaces for them to realize, oh, there's a big community here. What we've also been able to do is connect different people together. The advantage I have as a community manager for a hosting platform is I'm not specific to any country, but I'm able to see what's happening in every country and be like, oh, you should meet this person, and you guys are doing this thing, and if you guys do, I feel like that's like how Spider-Man throws out his webs. I feel like that's what I'm doing, is just pulling, excuse me, hi, just come here, meet this person, I think you two should talk, okay, bye. I think also understanding that on the continent a lot of things are on the nucleus. So it's very country based first and then grow it out. So try and figure out what's happening in the countries, who are the people I need to talk to in those countries, so that then I can grow it in that sense. But the other thing is we've been creating a lot of platforms for education. Again, in the 6 years that I've been in the space, every time it's just, when I was starting, it was so hard to get information on podcasting. There's nothing about us. And a lot of times when I tell people this, they're like, but YouTube has all of these things. I'm like, yes, YouTube has it, but it's not, there's a focus on Africa. I don't know how to explain. There's things we know are challenges here that are not challenges for the people creating the YouTube videos that we're watching. So how do I create content for the people who I represent? And so it's creating spaces for them to be able to learn from other podcasters. We've done collaborations with some communities, like come and learn about how to market your podcast. It's something as basic as that. What would you do as a podcaster to market your podcast? And they come in. So we have spaces, we'll have Instagram lives, we'll do Zoom things like discoverability. Why SEO? It's something so basic and it seems very obvious, I guess. But for me, it's even in the obvious. I want to be able to tell people this is an RSS. Why an RSS? Because if you're in the industry for a long time, RSS feels like a normal word that you throw around. And of course, you have to, why haven't you distributed? But for someone who's learning about podcasting, what does distribution mean? And what is an RSS? So it's up to me to be like, okay, so think of your RSS as your passport, that kind of thing. And it's breaking it down to that level so that then they're able to figure out, okay, so my podcast has a passport that allows it to be in different places so that it's listened to. This is important because of this. And then now I have a podcaster who's available everywhere, but they understand why it's important for them. Or if you're picking a podcast platform, make sure you have an RSS. I had a podcaster who I met was like, I was trying to move my podcast. They didn't have one. So I had to download all my audio and re-upload it. It's small things that seem obvious, but we have to educate. So education has been a very I think my primary touch point at this, like right now, both for the continent where I'll do things virtually, but also in Kenya. So we have partnerships, for example, with Baraza Media Lab. They'll give us the space. Bless them. Maurice has and his team have done such a good job with that. So we'll just come in and we'll create a panel and we'll have podcasters talking about something specific. So people will come in to learn about whatever it is. So we did one like last year with a few big podcasters and they're talking about social media and everything. So people come in to learn from, okay, this is someone I admire. How do I learn from them? And in creating these spaces, also what we've done is create accessibility in the industry. How do I get to Talib? I can get to you, but how do I get you to the podcaster who wants to meet you but can't get you? So if I create the space, then again, in Spider-Man web form, I'll just bring in the person because I have the access and allow someone else to learn from them. And I think that's what I feel like my role is, creating the spaces for people to have accessibility to each other, but also learn from each other and also realize that each other exists. So just creating spaces, I think, is basically how we're doing it.
Absolutely. And I want to just give you your flowers for this because it's one thing for someone on the outside looking in to say, here you go, here's what y'all want and need. And it's like, actually, no, we actually need something completely different from that. And so it's so important for you and people in your roles to understand that I need to talk to the people to see what they want and need so that I can provide that, not what I think, right? And that is mutually beneficial. You're growing and they're growing. And wow, I
Thank you.
love it all. It's so awesome. So, all right. Could you share insights about your role as social media consultant and even an event manager and how these skills benefit the podcast community?
Social media, the reason it becomes important is in understanding from community why education is important. I'm able to put that into what it is we're doing on social media. So it's a podcasting tip. Make sure you check your sound before this. I like to use those tips because I did content creation for a while, and I remember there's a time I did a whole thing and I hadn't realized, like, I hadn't pressed record and I spoke to myself for like half an hour and then I didn't want to do it again. It's, did you check your record button? It's very simple things like that. It's also allowing people to see other podcasters. A lot of what we're doing right now is putting the faces of like podcasters on the continent. I think it helps to have faces behind things. It's not just like African podcasting, it's like, this is African podcasting. And if they see someone they can talk to or relate to or see something about, I feel like that's an important part of it. So it's creating relatability as well in that sense. And it's giving a feedback point. A lot of times, what I'm dealing with on social media is, I want to do this. How do I migrate? Where I'm trying to figure this out on this thing. How do I do this? So it becomes a space where people can feel comfortable in asking questions um, to you because they trust, like, you're a trusted person in the industry and they believe that you know what it is you're doing. So I think it's important in that sense as well. But it also allows us to put a spotlight on podcasters. A lot of what I do on social media is, I'll be like, this is Afros and Audios podcast. You need to listen to it. This is Okay Kiasi. You need to listen to it. That kind of thing where it's tag us and we'll push it because it helps for people to see. If in a day I'm sharing 5, 6, 7 stories, someone's like, oh, I can listen to it, or someone else is like, oh, I can start my podcast. So either way, you're growing the industry in that sense. But there's a sense of also fulfillment for the podcaster who's like, oh, there's someone who sees what I'm doing. I'm not doing it for myself. There's a platform somewhere that sees that I'm doing something, and it encourages the person in the space to continue doing what it is they're meant to do in the space. So I think that's why it's important on social media. On events, I mean, who doesn't like a party? So give me the money. I'm going to put podcasters in a room and just let them talk because, I mean, we know podcasters like to talk. So it's really fun to see also, like I was saying earlier, it's the accessibility. It's the podcaster who you know is big and has like 10,000 streams, 100,000 streams, talking to the person who's like at 100 and watching the joy on their faces when they're like, oh, that's oh my God, he's here. Oh, it makes me so happy to see, like, to create spaces where they're able to do that. One of the things we did last year, one of the events, there was the Tap magazine launch. We did a whole magazine on just one issue of Tap magazine on just African podcasting. And then because we were partnering with them, we did a launch for that. And it's just looking at podcasters see themselves in the magazine and be like, I wrote that, I'm recognized. It's like, that's me, that's my thing. It's really exciting to see that. It's almost tangible joy from the creatives where they feel seen. So I feel like the reason events are important is it allows them space to see each other, but it also gives them recognition. It's I belong somewhere. It gives them something to belong in. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a win-win all the way around. And yeah, you speak in my language. It's those things where we get to see the people who are deserving, right? Who are
Mhm.
worthy of being seen and being heard, and their story matters, to be able to say, yeah, it does matter. Thank you.
Mhm.
I knew that, but I'm glad that you
I
you
know.
know that.
I'm glad you know that I know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. What are some of the unique challenges and opportunities you have encountered while promoting African stories and voices in the podcasting space?
For me, one of the challenges is language. I feel like, unfortunately, because I don't know all African languages, I wish I could. If I had a superpower, I would speak all of them. It makes it hard to promote what you don't know or access what you don't know. I mean, it makes it harder for me to get to someone who's speaking a language I don't speak and tell them, okay, this is what's available. This is an option. I need you to come on board, or this is my excitement. I don't feel like we're able to do that. I'm trying, though, where we're trying to figure out if it's getting people, let's say, for example, in Kenya, it's, for Africa, it's like Francophone Africa, Anglophone Africa, Lusophone. So, how do we get, when Anglophone Africa is getting something done, how do we ensure Francophone Africa has the same access? You know, I don't speak French, but I can reach out to like Sinato, who did like Oho Podfest. It's one for like Francophone podcast. I can reach out to her because I know me and her can speak and she has access in that world. So it's trying to figure out that connection. And it's been a challenge, but it's exciting to try and figure out how to work around it as well. Then, ooh, what other challenges would I have? I think that would be my main one because I feel like innately as Africans, we all have, I can't explain it, we're the same person, but we're different. I don't think it's only as Africans. You know how I can tell you a story about I broke a glass and I hid it. And when my mom got home, I didn't need to finish the story. You completely understand. It's like, ooh, what that? I feel like there's that in the essence of who we are. I think it's just trying to figure out how to bring it together in our differences without in celebrating our differences, but together. And I think that's the greatest challenge. Yeah, try and figure that out.
Yeah, that's understandable. And yeah, that's diasporic, that's global. When you broke a
Yeah.
glass and you hit it, we all know what's happening.
Oh,
Right? I know what's happening, you know what's happening.
I did
So
not say nothing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's interesting. I really can appreciate that. And that is obviously something that we here in the West don't really have that experience of all these different languages, right? People speak multiple languages, but the common ground is going to be English for most people. And so I can really appreciate that is a challenge, and that once you all are able to overcome that challenge, because I have no doubt that you will, people have to recognize how monumental that achievement is. Because if the intention is there, right, to bring in people who can speak to this group of people and and that's possible, that's still something that had to be intentional, and with the strategy of wanting this to grow and allow space for everyone to
Yeah.
come in. And I know you all are already doing the work. So
We're trying to. So
yeah.
one of the things like I did this year, 12th February is Africa Podcast Day. So yesterday. And it's including a Francophone panel that's in French, very specifically. So we don't know what's happening. I can't tell you, I can't edit it. I don't know what they talk about. but they're going to have their platform because they need to also be able to express themselves in a language that is for the people that they're speaking to. And it's just including them in things. It's the accessibility. I'm not doing anything supernatural. It's just give them a platform that works for them so that they can speak to their people in the same platform that we have all of the other panels. It's you are with us and we are one, and it's making sure that is spoken to everyone and understood by everyone. And I think then it helps grow slowly. Maybe next time we'll get someone from the Portuguese speaking countries, get them to do a panel as well. We have the Spanish speaking countries, get them to do a panel as well, so that everyone understands also Africa is not just us, it's all of us. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so with your podcast, Okay Kiasi,
Hmm.
what themes do you explore and what has been your experience co-hosting it? And shout
Of
out your
course.
co-host.
My co-hosts are my sisters. Hey girls, hey. So I do the podcast with my big and small sister Nyambura and Shiko. The podcast actually started in 2022. It was the first time we'd been together. So okay, so we come from a broken family, standard 2024 families. Our parents divorced when we were young, but then our small sister grew up in a different home. Me and my big sister grew up in one. So I feel like in 2022 when we were meeting, we'd gone for our stepsister's wedding. If you listen to the podcast, this will make sense. This feels very weird now, but we'd gone for our wedding, and then now the three of us were together at my small sister's house. She lives in Atlanta. And so we were just sitting and like, oh my God, this is the first time we've been together in like 20 something odd years in the same house for a long period of time, right? And we're like, wouldn't it be so interesting if we started a podcast? And that was me, obviously. And so we sat down and we just talked about family, we talked about relationships, we talked about like what it's like being siblings, we talked about like what it was like growing up in like the broken home. So the perspective from my small sister being alone, me and my sister being together, just small things like that. We've done everything from like birth order, why is it important, to things like apology languages. Who knew that was a thing? But learning in that sense. We've had guests talking about like careers, we've talked about periods and women's health, we've talked about mental health, we've talked about everything, but from the perspective of our relationship as sisters. And it's been very interesting to have people come up to us and be like, oh, my dad is like that, and you gave me a new perspective into this kind of thing, or because of this, I talked to my siblings and this is happening, or because of this, my husband and I did. And it's just like, we didn't know we were going to do that. That wasn't the plan at the beginning. We were just sitting down with mics to be sisters. And it's very interesting the impact that it's had, especially because Africans, we don't talk about our homes. What happens at home stays at home. We don't like, I know a lot of aunties and uncles are upset with us because of how we've like approached it. It's like, how dare you speak that way? It's just like, it's interesting because our parents listen to it and they're like, huh? I didn't know that happened. Or it's my mom being like, you did what? And be like, mom, shh, and that kind of thing. So I think it's been interesting to have, it's a glimpse into an African home that is not spoken about, and relationships, because I mean, a lot of times people aren't friends with their siblings. I'm lucky because my sisters and I are actually friends outside of being sisters. So I think that's about our podcast and the interesting impact it's had. Very unexpected, but very exciting.
That's awesome. And it goes back to your earlier point about language and spaces where the stories don't typically move beyond that space. There's someone out there that can relate, and that's the importance of it. And not only can relate, but needs it. Like, I need to hear this from somewhere, because in my head it makes me feel like something's wrong. But if I hear it out
Yeah,
elsewhere,
it's something like, I thought it was only my family. Oh my God, I thought it was only me. Or I have like, there's a friend of mine who I call my sister's twin now because they're completely the same person, but they're like, they didn't know each other. And now it's just like, oh, my twin, because they're identical. And it's just finding, I think it's finding someone to relate to.
hmm
And yeah, at
yeah.
an instant level.
Absolutely, absolutely. And over here in the West, the same thing. What happens in the house stays in the house. And the great thing about Gen Zers is that they're disrupting all of this. And then Gen Alphas, they don't care about anything. so, so
No problem.
This
If you did it to me, I can talk about it.
right, right. So there's a whole disruption that's about to happen in general.
Yeah.
So you all are before your time in a
Yeah.
way because
We're
it's
getting
coming.
it for it.
Oh yeah, it's coming. And interestingly enough, I have a twin sister, and we grew up
Oh,
in the
wow.
same house. And we were talking maybe 3 years ago, and it's like we lived two different lives in the same exact house. I'm like, really?
Crazy.
What?
It's
Yeah.
like your birthday. What happened? No, that's not what happened. This happened. Oh, wait, what? You felt what? Oh, there's an episode where we actually, like, we're talking about things. It's just like, I didn't do that. I did what? I made you feel that. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. And then now we're all crying and it's a mess, but it's amazing. It's so much fun. And my dad
That,
is a twin also. That's so crazy.
wow, wow. No, that's awesome. And it just goes to show, it's like we talk about black people not being a monolith, right? We could be siblings. We're not a monolith, right? We're different
Yep.
perspectives, different filters, and different experiences, even if it was the same exact experience. It's so interesting. So I know that it's got to be a great podcast, and I can't wait to listen. So, for sure, you mentioned the importance of starting right away instead of waiting for the right time in the intake. And again, we were talking about how y'all are busy over there, and it's like, okay, yeah, but we have to. It's time, right? Can you share a personal experience where this approach made a significant impact?
Wow. Oh my goodness. I think I have so many, I feel like I have so many examples. Okay, so for me, it would be in, for example, it's fighting for education to be the center of something. I feel like a lot of times, because I'm in the space talking to the podcasters, a lot of people don't, if I say we need to educate, you're just like, but they have the information, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, 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 this is what they need. And so what ended up happening is I went and registered a company and I'm building curriculum for podcasting just based on what it is I've heard people want and what they need. And it's just one of those things. For a long time, I was like, someone else will do it, someone else will figure it out, someone else will do this thing. And it's been 6 years. No one has done it yet. So maybe you should. And so it's just, I think that's been the most impactful on myself personally, because for a long time, I feel like I made it someone else's responsibility, or I was waiting for someone else to create the impact so that I can come in and be like, oh, this is what you can do, and this is how you can do it, and this is because I have the information, and I'm like, oh, I can do this, 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 this. And it's just, no, actually, I have to do it myself. And it's very scary because, again, like you were mentioning, I always say that time is never going to be right. So I don't think it's the right time now. I'm scared because who am I to be the one to speak on podcasting and educate? But at the same time, I am the person who has had the access to the podcasters. I'm the person who's been allowed access to people like you, and people outside who are able to help them. I remember, like, when we did the last panel, you gave me access to all of the panels that you have done for the festival before. And I'm just like being able to now talk to other community managers and say, oh yeah, I have this piece of information, share it in your community. And it's, what are we getting for it? Nothing, just take it and share it. And then having a conversation with someone else who's like, oh, I'm building a platform that allows for people to get education. And it's just like, oh, you tell me this when I decide I need to build a curriculum. Interesting. But I feel like that for me has been the most impactful, is being, taking a bet on myself outside of creating a podcast, is just being like, is this my responsibility? Maybe. If I fail, it's okay. Question mark. I don't know about failing, but yeah, I think for me that has been the most impactful so far in the industry. I'm just starting it, but it's something that I've thought about, prayed upon, cried about, and done all of that. But I think that's the most impactful thing I'm doing now. So that would be the thing. What will happen? What will the true impact be? I guess join us next year and find out. But I mean, like, that's what I'm at right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be impactful because your intention is very clear, and that is to support and educate, and what can go wrong.
Well,
If
that's why it's taken me 6 years. I'm just like,
yeah,
why you, first of all? But yeah, I think the thing is, I feel like it's very important. I always say it's important for African stories to be told, but it's very important for them to be told by people in Africa. I feel like for a long time, our stories have been told to us, and we've been told what version we should have. Like how right now there's this whole conversation happening with the British Museum loaning Ghana artifacts that are Ghanaian. And it's just like, loan? What are we doing here? And I feel like that's the same way stories have been told about Africa. It's the same way we're talking about earlier. There's a certain image that is there. And I think it's time for us to break through that image, but not for the world to see, for us. There's a perspective that sometimes I feel like a lot of times people think you create content for the global audience. And I don't think it needs to be for the global audience. I think it needs to be for us to be able to see ourselves in a light that is not what we've been shown we should be. I need to be able to see a version of me that is, podcast community manager and something. So that the girl behind me who's coming up, if she wants to do something, she can be like, oh, I'm going to do this. I need to be able to have a version of Talib who's like, I created a festival, on my own, and I did this thing, so you can do it. And I think that's why it's important for our story to be told. And that's why I'm very passionate about it being done in our stories and on our terms, because I feel like sometimes a lot of people feel like we're trying to, it's like Africa to the world. And it's like, no, 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 it's Africa to Africa. I need the 13-year-old, I need the 5-year-old, I need the toddler to see us and be like, I can be that. Because if we believe in our greatness, then we're unstoppable. Because it doesn't matter, like when someone tells you, if at home you're told you're the best, you're the best, you're the best. When someone tells you you're not, you're just like, that's cute. I know I'm the best. I need that to be that's the narrative I'm trying to build. It's us, about us. Like, this is who we are in whatever version of us we show up in, which is why I'm like, it's not only the cities that need to be recognized. I need it to be the rural areas as well. The places where, yes, you live in a mud hut, but that matters. Yes, you had to put on a fire every night, but that version matters just as much as me who lived in the city all my life and turned on the electricity. I need both stories to matter, and I need both stories to be told. So hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I
we're
love
able-
that, and whatever we can do to support the initiative, because it's important. And you bring up this idea of possibility, which is so important. And I've considered myself a bit of a philosopher. One of my ideas is that our greatness is not about us at all. Like, it doesn't belong to us. It's not about us. It is meant for the world. And somebody somewhere is waiting for us to say, it's not about me. It's about
Mhm,
who needs to see me, right? So
mhm.
that they can also step out of the shadows. So,
Yeah.
yeah, mic drop. I loved it. You got it. So,
Fingers crossed. Breath held.
yeah, yeah. In your view, what is the most rewarding aspect of creating a platform like AfriPods for the continent?
I think the most rewarding thing is seeing Africans be seen, allowing them to feel like they own something, allowing them to feel like they belong to something, allowing them to feel like something belongs to them. I think that's the most impactful thing about it, because it's down to the name, where it's just like, it's for African podcasts. Thank you. It's like, that's how detailed it is. It's the number of podcasters who've come and been like, thank you so much for categorizing in language, because that's important to me. Or I was trying to find it in my country. Thank you. Because I'm in Ghana and I know one podcast. How do I get the others? And it's right there. Click a button. And it's small things like that it's the joy people feel when they find out things like that. Or I can put my podcast on your platform and my language is available. It's something as basic as that, where it's just like, oh, thank you. It's that sense of ownership. I feel like that's the most impactful. So for me, that's what it is. It's feeling of ownership for what it is that's being done. Also, because like I know as AfriPods, we're trying to figure out monetization as well. So it's not just tell your stories, it's tell your stories and earn from it. And so it's even seeing how many stories are coming on board, the variation of stories where it's like politics, but it's law, and then it's friends who are just having a conversation and kicking on something. and then it's gossip, and then it's fashion, and it's just being able to see that range, I think, is important.
And it all matters. And that's something that we push around here, that we drive culture and we drive content and stuff like that. But it's like, let's start owning as well.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yes, we do. That's clear. It's been that way forever. Let's start focusing on the ownership of it all. And also, as you mentioned previously, creating without any other lens or gaze besides our own, right? Because that's where we're going to move our culture and our opportunities, is when we focus up and stop focusing out.
So, because we don't have anything for, if we're honest with ourselves, we don't have a lot for ourselves. So in order for our future generations to learn from what we have, to be the ones to do it, but we have to focus, like you're saying, focus in. The rest will figure it out. Like, the money will come if you have the numbers, and we know we have the numbers. So that's why I'm like, I'm not worried about everything else. It's just, how do we get ourselves to believe in ourselves enough to do what we need to do?
Absolutely. All right, I have two last questions for you.
Sure,
Uh,
let's go.
what advice would you give to podcast hosts, audio professionals, and others in the industry about embracing and promoting diverse voices and stories?
Um, if you have an idea and you think it's crazy, it's a good idea, do it. I always say there's no bad idea, there's no bad question, there's no dumb question, there's no dumb idea. Try it, figure it out, fail at it, but you learn from it. I feel like a lot of times what we get stuck doing is trying to figure out the perfect how and when and all of that. Then you never do the thing. And I feel like a lot of times in everything, it's been my experience and a lot of people's experiences, I'm sure yours as well, where when you start something is when there's something you learn only after you've started. So it's like I was saying earlier, I recorded something, I forgot to check the recording button. Now, every time I have my camera out, I have to check that record button, you know. There's a time I didn't check my nose, I had a booger, I did a whole video, I couldn't use it because that's all I could see. So it's now next time I know I have to check my face, make sure I have this and this done. You know, it's something as basic as that. But if I'd never started, I wouldn't know to do the booger check, you know? So whatever version of that it is for you, I think, um, figure out your story, but don't get lost in the how. Start it. If you check a lot of podcasters, there's a story I like to tell from Adele. Adele is one of the big podcasters in Kenya, and she said she was 40 episodes into her podcast before she realized she had the wrong setting on her mic. And so she'd had bad sound for 40 episodes. But if it wasn't for someone who'd listen to the 40 episodes and be like, girl, your mic, you need to check this thing. And she went to do the research and be like, oh, oops, okay, her podcast is syndicated, right? But she had to do the 40 podcasts in bad sound in order to discover how to fix the sound. And so sometimes I feel like, just tell the story. If you have the story, tell the story. If you have the knowledge on, like, if you're a podcast professional, audio professional, and you have the knowledge and you feel like there's something that needs to be done, figure out how to get it done, figure out who you can access to get it done for you, and just do it. I mean, I don't know that there's ever going to be a time where I'll be like, think through a bit, but not too much. Don't think it through to the point that it paralyzes you in your thought. Just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, Gathoni, I think we need to go on a tour together and just talk our stuff, because yes, yes,
I'm
you
ready.
know,
Tell me when. Tell the date.
right, right.
Ready.
People get, and that how will stop you before you ever start.
It
You
will.
will learn as you go and allow space for that. And that's so important, especially for creators. Those ideas are going to continue to tap you on your shoulder and ask you, are we going to do it today? Or are we
They'll
going to
keep you
keep
up at
waiting?
night.
Right, right. So it's like, I believe wholeheartedly that out of all the 8 billion people in this world, if an idea has come to you specifically, it could have went to another person in the 8 billion, but it came to you. So that means that you already have enough to
Mhm.
begin and to realize it. And so let's go. Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing? It's time out
Oh,
for waiting. Yes.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right. So, how can people find out more about you? Where can they find you online, AfriPods, and you specifically?
Okay, so AfriPods, our website is afripods.africa. You can go there, and if you're a podcaster, you can start your podcast for free. Like I mentioned before, hosting is free. If you have a podcast already, you can submit it or migrate it. Whoever is listening, please bring your podcast. I mean, if you want to reach the African audience, submit your podcast on the platform. You don't lose getting a new platform, so do it. We're trying to get as many people on board as possible. You can get AfriPods everywhere at AfriPods, social media, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're trying TikTok. Pray for us, but we're trying TikTok. But you can find us at AfriPods. You can find me at Okay Kiasi, OKAYKIASI. On all social media platforms. Our podcast is also available on all listening platforms, including AfriPods. I need to plug that. And then you can find me at Podcasting in Africa on social media. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. Yeah. So Podcasting in Africa, that's where I'll be trying to figure out my education thing. So fingers crossed, pray for me. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, this has been a pleasure. Is there anything else that you want to speak on or say, promote, ask for support, whatever it is, before we close out?
Yeah, sure. I would say if you're a Black creative in the podcasting space, please include Africa. I know you've really fought for the space that you've been in. I've been with you guys at Podcast Movement, just trying to figure out who are we, where are we, and how are we getting here. So it's a lot harder for us. So anywhere you can make space for the African creative in whatever sense of the word. If you're going to create a platform, give them a place to speak. There's people who will do everything. If you have like a magazine, give them a spot. If you have a newsletter, find out what's happening in Africa. If you do research, come and do it here. I mean, we have talk to us, we'll figure out how to get the data to you. But I mean, if you have any access that you can share, please send it our way. We're working hard on the continent, and so any help we can get, any help we can receive, we will appreciate. But give the people let them have the platforms. There's a lot of people who speak a lot better than I do, and they have a lot more to say. So give them the platforms, and you won't be disappointed.
At
Yeah.
all. I can attest to that. Not that I ever expected to be disappointed, but it's been such an enriching and encouraging and motivational the opportunity to witness what's happening on the continent. And I just can't wait to continue to do more and see you all grow. And by you all, it still is a us thing. And so the more we grow, the more you grow. The more you grow, the more we grow. And that's so important. And I'm just excited for it all. So thank you
So
again for being here and having this conversation with me. It's been a pleasure.
thank you for allowing me on your platform. Thank
Absolutely,
you.
absolutely. So I'm going to close this out and you stay right there for me. I want to give a big thanks to our Afros in Audio and Black Podcasters Association members for supporting our commitment for community and collaboration. If you'd like to join the Black Podcasters Association, the link will be in the description. And if you want to join us at the 6th annual Afros in Audio Podcast Festival, visit afrosinaudio.com. Follow Afros in Audio on all social media channels, and you can find me at Talib Jasir on Instagram. Thanks again, Gathoni, for being a part of Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.